Anyone who listens to Pocket Sized Pep Talks know I interview a lot of authors. Now, maybe you've kicked around the idea of writing a book yourself, but let's have ourselves a Pocket Sized Pep Talk because you'd be very surprised at exactly what publishers are really focusing on. And I'll give you a hint, at least initially, it's not your manuscript. Curious? I have the best editor on the planet in today, my editor. He's going to walk you through this.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Neal Mallett, began his publishing career working on the same floor at the same publisher as Jackie Onassis in New York and rode the elevator with her 3 times. How's this for a bio? He's worked most of his career at Berrett, Koehler, John Wiley & Sons, and Timber Press Workman, now part of Hachette. In 35 years as an editor, he's signed over 500 books and authors, all in nonfiction. He currently edits books in leadership, personal development, and organizational change. I am glad to have him with us. It took a while, but welcome to the show, my good friend, Neal.
Thank you, Rob. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, you can tell one of us is very excited about this. I'm not saying who.
That was really up for me, so I don't know. I'll have some more coffee here.
There you go. We're on the West Coast. You're a few hours behind us. Listen, it's really great to get you here. So I want to dive right in. And, I'm going to start. I've been waiting 30 years to ask you this question. I want to go back to the night you left me at the altar. My first book, I connected with Neal. It was 30 years ago. I was very excited. And then he became a forest ranger. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I got out of school. I went to school in New York City, English major, read unemployable, and figured out either, apply to law school, apologies to any lawyers out there, or get a job as an editorial assistant, which is what I ended up with. But it had never really been like an intentional plan. So after a few years, kind of moving up the ladder a little bit, working on your book, I decided I'm going to make a big life change and went across the country, did work with the Bureau of Land Management, otherwise known as BLM. We used to joke it was Bureau of Lonely Men. Lived in a ranger station out in the desert for a while, and then promptly got another publishing job. Started working at a publisher called Timber Press in Portland, Oregon, which is where I landed after all that traveling around, and been in publishing ever since. So I tried to get out, but they always hook you and bring you back in.
Bringing you back in. Yeah. I will tell you, and now we'll bounce off this and get to work. I was actually looking at a couple of publishers, very blessed. I actually had a few offers, and I took less money. And having never even met Neal, just speaking to him on the phone, I went with Wiley, and then he left me, and that's why for 30 years I've given him a hard time about it.
Your book is still in print, is it not? It's actually, yeah.
You had a good eye. It's in its 4th edition. It's still out there. But all right, let's carve up. Let's get into this. Listen, one of the magic words in publishing for editors is platform. Okay, so let's start with what editors consider a platform. And I want listeners to hear this because this is who are thinking of writing a book. It's a real important beginning for us here. So tell us about what you consider a platform.
Yeah, we use that word daily many times. I think authors might be a little bit shocked, actually, how often we talk. I hate to say it, we may often talk more about your platform than the content. Even though we all know we're in this business to, make lives better, create quality content, we got to get people to, go out and buy it. And that's where platform comes into it. And it's amazing how the term has stayed the same since I got into publishing. It has definitely evolved over the years. I would say platform, when I got started, like in the 80s, I hate to go back to when I really started in publishing, it was much more of like just pure reputation. How likely were you to get a book review in the New York Times? Were you going to get picked in the Book of the Month Club? It was really more of an intangible, what's your clout? We use that clout score on the internet, but how much of a following do you have? And back then there really were no ways to quantify it, right? It was more of a subjective thing. But the term was really used then, and it boils down to how many people are really, what is your following? Do you have followers? And I think that's the part that we spent a lot of time talking to authors about. They have a great idea for a book, and they think that's step one: write a great book, send your manuscript into the publisher. And I think at one time, maybe in the 1930s or 40s, it probably kind of worked that way. There's great stories of, that book being picked off in the mail room, and, next thing you know, you're publishing Ernest Hemingway. But those days are kind of over. And for platform now, we're looking much more at, do you have a TED Talk? If you did a TED Talk, do you have 500 views? Do you have 10,000 views? 50,000, a million? Do you have a LinkedIn Learning class? Is your LinkedIn Learning class, did you get 500 subscribers, 100,000, 200,000? So platform in the world of the internet has become much more quantifiable. I mean, there is a thing called the cloud score. I don't know if people use that anymore, but it was out there for a while. Do you have YouTube, a channel? How many people are coming into YouTube channel? I see a lot of authors, they might hear a talk like this, boy, I got to get myself a YouTube channel. And then they go and they throw some videos on there, check it off, great. But then they don't do anything to really bring viewers or add more content. And then there's 7 views on their videos on their YouTube channel. And at that stage, it's doing you more harm than good, because it's not about checking the box. It is about getting followers. So having a channel and not having followers is almost worse, than anything else. So over time, I have seen platform kind of evolve from a more insider, elite kind of decision, on how important is this person, to something where on some level, it's much more democratic now. Everybody has a shot to, create an online channel or Instagram or and get viewers. And, I have another, it doesn't have to be any particular channel. Our author Parker Palmer sold, hundreds of thousands of books. He really only uses Facebook, but man, he gets more traffic, out of his Facebook page than, other people get out of all kinds of different channels. So it doesn't have to be any one way, but we are definitely looking for how many followers do you have? That's just the simplest way to say it. I mean, the other big number that for our world, Rob, where you have, you're going to a more business audience or career professional audience, it's your email list. And I get your email, so I know, I have a feeling I'm not the only person on your email. I hope your email list isn't, email Neal mail it. I sent him his email this week.
I sent 17 emails just to you, just so you know.
Yeah, that's another way to get your email, count up, email list is great because that is probably the most direct, personal way somebody interacts with you. There aren't that many people, frankly. I think at one time it was easier to get people to get large email lists. We've all become a little bit burnt out on how many people want us to get on their list. So if you're able to, stay on somebody's email list, not get opted out, people are opening up your newsletter or whatever, that's becoming more and more important. So that number is really important. Yeah. So
let me jump in for a second, Neal. Mm-hmm. Let me jump in on you. Okay, I got it. And I remember 5-6 years ago, somebody that Neal and I both know who works at Berrett, Koehler, Jivan, gave a presentation and said quite sort of bluntly, I'm not even opening an envelope with a manuscript until I get a sense of how many Twitter followers or X followers now, but And I remember everybody's jaw kind of dropped, but sort of welcome to the new millennium, you know.
Yeah.
And before I'm going to get you out of trouble here, because I work with a lot of newer authors, and they're all, when they even get a publisher, they're so disillusioned, like, well, they don't seem to be doing all that much to push my book. And I have to explain to them, you know, that there may not be an Easter bunny, and there's some rumors there may not be a Santa Claus, although I think there is. But anyway, but the fact of the matter is, it's the responsibility of the author to promote their book. And I have big publishers and I have small publishers, and they're all pretty much the same. It's our responsibility. So it makes sense when Neal is telling you right now that he's loving to see manuscripts, but it's a business. And Berrett, Koehler, I sing their praises all the time, but Berrett, Koehler is one of the greatest publishers on this planet. We want to keep them in business. So they're trying to be nice people, but they've got to sell books. They need help from the authors, and they need a help from the author before they open up that manuscript, which leads me to my next question, which I think we all know the answer, but I'm going to throw it out there because I want to hear you answer it. I got a great idea. Okay. Can a great idea written very well trump a weak platform?
Good question. Every now and then, I would say, the stars align, lightning strikes. And in a way, it is the fun part about being an editor, when you might come across that proposal or that idea that just, maybe this person doesn't have all the numbers lined up, like I just mentioned, they're breaking the rules, but you just fall in love with that content. And there still is room for that. So I don't want to sound like we're just, card counters, behind the scenes. One book I would give as an example of that, and this is an author who's grown quite a bit since we published that first book. His first book anywhere, and with us, was a book called Get to the Point. And it was just it was pure genius the way he wrote the book. He stayed on topic. And how many people haven't heard that in their business lives or careers or presentations? And he's figured out a way to put that in a book, and it's gold. And he did start to build the platform. Look, one thing we do at Berrett Koehler, that recognizing that not everybody shows up on the day like a great book idea hits them with a ready-made platform. We have a marketing workshop. There are ways out there to learn this. Right. People like listening to your channel, obviously, but there are marketing workshops, there are author, workshops and retreats. Berrett Koehler puts on, some of these. We try to keep the prices pretty reasonable. I say Berrett Koehler, it's really the Berrett Koehler Authors Group. And to try to give everybody kind of a level playing field. And sometimes we might sign up an author who's not quite got the numbers yet, but they're just so hungry, and they're going to sign up for that author, marketing workshop, and they got, they're on that learning curve, and you can just kind of tell it's like a growth stock. Like, okay, we're going to get behind this person. Yeah. So that can be something you want to send the message to the publisher as well. It really was. I can honestly say this was the case when I started my career, and it's amazing how the world has changed. There was a time when it was considered kind of unseemly, I would say, for an author to be too market savvy. Maybe not for you, Rob. I know.
No. I'm telling you, in 1993, I was a very polite guy. Okay, like if you want to buy it, that'd be good. I don't want to push. But by my third book, it was like, I really need you guys to buy this. I don't know if I ever told this story, but my sixth book, I had a room, about 80 people in there, and I said, I've given you alcohol, I've given you heavy hors d'oeuvres, you've been fed, you've been drinking. I don't know how else to say this. And I actually dropped to my hands and knees and said, I'm begging you for reviews on Amazon and pushing. Now, is anyone confused as to what I'm trying to say here? But that is the maturation process of an author too, and an industry. We have to go out and fight. Let me throw this. I'm going to change the question real fast.
Yeah.
I've got somebody has a really good manuscript, maybe not the great social media following, but they're hungry. But they're walking in and saying, but I'm going to purchase a few thousand copies and I'm going to sign up with one of your lists of publicists, a real, a professional publicist on a 6-month campaign. Folks, that's going to cost you some, maybe about 20,000 or so. Okay. But I'm going to put some money behind it. I'm going to buy some books and I got a good idea. Now, where am I?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I agree. The good idea doesn't, go away.
Yeah, I didn't leave
if
it
you're
out.
able to. Yeah. So exactly. You don't want to do all those things. And it's like, well, the idea is, but at least they're going to do all this other investment. Let's give it a shot. I mean, I'm not above, maybe to playing it safe at times, but it never really pays off if you're not really, really excited about the content. So,
yeah.
But yeah, you're right, Rob, that they're, again, it's almost like signaling to the publisher that you are going to go all out to sell this thing. And that was, like I said, years ago, that really wasn't almost seemly for an author maybe to be. The more we need authors to get out and basically ask for the sale. If you are still learning the ropes, maybe you are in the first book, there are more and more authors really are having to hire their own publicity team or book marketing team to bring to the table with the publisher. I won't mention, I'll give you an example of one press, one of the larger, Big 10 presses. I would say when I started working there or when I started knowing them, they probably have like one publicist per 20 books. And then I've seen over the years, and this is maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I was speaking to one of the publicists still at this place, and they're saying, well, we have about 100 titles assigned to us now per publicist. So they'll get a press release out. They'll maybe field some incoming calls, but you're not going to get a lot of individual attention from them. Being able to say, I'm going to make that investment, especially if you don't have that ready-made email list or all the other metrics to bring on board. If you can show that you're really going to go all in on the marketing and sales, that is worth a lot. It may be the difference for an editor. Say, man, I really want to sign this book, but I know the marketing department will kill me if, I sign something that just isn't, really got a following. That may help the editor who fell in love with your project, get over the hump of getting to a yes. So yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw just a couple of thoughts here with you. When where I said, there's no Santa Claus unless there's a children listening, and there is, but we're just not sure where he is right now. But the fact is that not only do publishers have to survive, but that it's another thing that's sort of a reckoning of somebody who lands a publisher and says, I don't get it. They have a publicist, but the publicist in my world, not Berrett Koehler, but in my world, every publicist I've ever had with a publisher has been 23 years old. Like you said, they got about 50 books. I got a press release. I got, 100 mailed out. They got 4 that came back with whatever. They did their job. And again, they're looking at you saying, I got 19 more books at my door. We have to push our books. That's just the reality. It's not bad luck. It's not a bad publisher. We have to push our books. But I changed the paradigm a little bit, and I say, once we accept that, it's enjoyable. You put your heart and soul into a book. I look at them as like my children. I want to do everything I can to make this child successful in life. Once they're out there, they're kind of on their own, but I'm going to give them every head start that we can. And that's why I am a believer that we always start with a conventional publisher, because I want that editorial team. I want those graphic artists. I want to connect with the people in there. And then there are other platforms we can go to. But again, we want these publishers to survive. And we have to remind ourselves that it's a business. They have to sell books. We have to help them. And if we do it, and I don't want to bury the lead, with a great idea that we're passionate about, that makes sense, now you're learning that we're building a recipe basically of now the publisher wants to look at that great idea that you have, but it's all packaged together. And we can't forget that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And I think I mentioned to you that most proposals that we get, and by the way, I mentioned manuscript and all that, never send a manuscript, at most
Good.
a proposal with 1 or 2 chapters, and then they will ask you for the manuscript if they want to keep reading. But if you hit anybody with a full manuscript, yeah, it's kind of like what you were saying with Jeevan. Even if you look kind of promising, we get, I think in my case, I probably get, a couple submissions every single day, so about 500 a year. I think the last time I counted it up. So, and I give a response to every one of them. So everybody gets, a response from me, but that also means, I don't have a lot of time to put into reading something that's just not going to move forward. So a proposal is definitely the way to go. And the thing I guess I mentioned to you earlier is that authors always kind of start with this like dive into their content. They got this like, moment of insight. There's no book on blank, there needs, and they kind of really go into selling me on the book idea.
Yeah.
And if I know who you are, great. Maybe that works. But if you're sending something to an editor, you don't know who that editor is, I would put more in the very first page about you, why, you are at the point where this book will be successful. Why are people expecting this book from you? Talk about that. That's much more.
I think that's smart. Again, you're the pro on this. I always think like the salesman. So I'm always also kind of running into my head, okay, what would be the objections to this, to my sale, to my product? Well, who else has written about this kind of thing? And what else is there out there? And so when we have a hint as to what the objections are, you're getting a hint as to what you want to put in your proposal. And what Neal's, I agree with you. I'm glad you're saying it. I've always recommended a chapter or two so that I can see that you can write. Hey, good, you can put sentences together. But now that I know that you can write, what else is there? How do I know you're going to be, what are you going to do behind this? Start selling a little bit. You don't have to go over the top, but understand that these are the questions that the publisher is going to be asking as they go through not one, but hundreds of manuscripts, hundreds of proposals. So let's give them a cheat sheet. Let's shorten it up a little bit. And they're going to want to know, who are you? Who knows you? Who do you know? Which I always throw in there a little bit of, maybe bringing in a couple of names that say, "Ooh, that person would be behind this book too." Again, all roads leading to the same thing. Can we be successful with this book as a team? As a team.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Neal. Jeevan, this name you keep hearing, came out with a piece in LinkedIn that really tweaked me a little bit, but I understood where he was going. Again, sometimes it's not the words, it's the tune, is it? But Jeevan was explaining to people that when they see what a publisher offers, which can be in their mind a little shocking as a little bit low on the royalty side, his response was, okay, I'll tell you what, instead of giving you 10%, we'll give you 90%. But you sign up for the things that we're going to do for a book. Could you just spend 60 seconds or so and help this audience understand why royalties need to be a little bit lower and what exactly the publisher is picking up that maybe the author doesn't know about?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I was just working on a P&L today. And so just to give you an example, for my goal on a P&L, if I'm trying to make the case, this is a book we should sign, I'm trying to get a contribution to profit of 5%, meaning that of all the money coming in, 5% gets put back in the safe in the back room at Berrett Koehler. The author's going to get 10%, like to start. You start at 10%. It could go up to 15, 20. So believe it or not, for a fully published conventional book, the author's royalty will typically exceed the actual takeaway profit of the publisher. That's kind of the thin margin area of the business. And it really only gets thinner and thinner because frankly, Amazon, as it gets more and more important, also gets higher and higher discounts. So there's just less left at the end of the day. I probably get in trouble for basically stating that, but it's just that's the way it is. I think that some of the costs that go into a book, if you start to add them all up, people, a lot of the things around just the normal metadata and getting things set up with the distributor, all of that work that kind of goes under the overhead bucket. The overhead on a book is going to be tens of thousands of dollars for people assigning the ISBN, uploading all the stuff, getting all the files going. But in terms of the biggest chunk of dollars, I think that people probably don't realize is how much it costs to print a book. The average kind of setup cost for copy editing, typesetting, all that's going to be well over $10,000 on average per book. Could be much higher if it's a much bigger book. Cover design, we'll call that $2,500 to get a really good professional cover design. But then the print bill itself, I rarely see print bills come in under $25,000.
Wow.
So paper's only gone up. So if you want a publisher to print 5,000 books at we'll say $4 a piece or something like that, that's like 20,000. And then of course you have to add in shipping and pre-press and all those other costs. So there's tens of thousands of dollars are being spent on it. And here's the interesting thing. If your book sells one copy, it's going to be the same amount of fixed costs going into like a print run in a book as a book that managed to sell 20,000 copies. So those costs are actually, it costs about the same to do a cover, whether it's a bestseller or a dog, So that's kind of the tricky part of the business. And that is one reason why I think royalties have kind of landed where they are. And I'll tell you, I mean, publishers are, I don't know. I mean, I have friends who are authors. I want authors to know, I don't think the publisher is seeing the royalty chunk of it as the place where they're kind of carving out some extra dollars for themselves. If anything, that's usually going to be the big hump we get over when we pay out those twice yearly royalties. That's always a big stressful period for us because now we got to get those checks out to the authors.
Right. Right. Oh, let me ask you one other question about that. And I think how I feel about this. The concept of advances. Okay. Everyone, particularly if you're kind of old school and you're hearing that word advance, what was your advance on this book? I'll tell you a funny story. That first book that we almost did together. I was sort of whittling at an advance. And I remember, I think you offered me a number and I said, well, could it be a little higher? You went, okay. You went a little higher. I had no idea that meant, well, you're not going to see a penny of royalty until we get that advance paid back. And after that, I realized that that's not something that I, as an author, want to focus on. I think you mentioned the 1930s or 1940s. I think back then, when you had this idea and the publisher said, now you go to that fishing hut, and you'll go write that book. And here, we're going to give you some money so you can eat. But nowadays, I think authors need to understand that you might not want to fixate on advances as much. I know I'm answering my own question, but I want your opinion on it. I don't fixate on the advance. I fixate on the publisher. I fixate on the plan that we put in place. And I really, maybe I'm just blessed, but I really don't need a little bit of money to hold me over until the royalty comes in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, we're on the same page. And I mean, I consider myself an author advocate, so if there's something that's going to make the author's life easier and cover some bills, whether they're maybe not working on the book, right. To me, that's a good argument for having an advance. But as you say, that just means you're not going to get royalties that much longer. So weirdly, you're going to get a little more money up front, but you're going to wait longer for the royalty checks to start coming in. So it's not like it's a loan essentially.
I had no idea that, by the way. I thought it was just extra, but I learned that. You go in.
Yeah. And I actually think if you don't need the advance, and to be honest, publishers in general have started to really clamp down on them as a risk factor. Right. It may be to your benefit to just say, you know what, I really don't need that advance. Maybe consider, since that's off the P&L, could you put a little more money into marketing, or use that as a negotiation point to make the author feel like, oh well, I have more money to invest in the book. I'm not saying that really works out dollar for dollar. I've seen a couple things. So the New York commercial trade house is definitely when you're a big time author and you're going through the auctions and all that, those auctions are literally how much advance is that person going to pay, and they will so and so put $50,000 down and will you give me 60? So the advances tend to be kind of a almost like an auction mentality, highest bidder gets the book, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I will say what you will miss in that whole scenario is any kind of sense that you're really building the relationship with the publisher. I know this is true. Maybe this may not make publishers sound great, but having worked at a couple of the larger houses and seen this process, you become like the talent that they bought. It's not a partnership anymore. They dug in and they had to pay, and it hurt to pay that big advance to get your book on their list. Well, they really see you as theirs now. It's not, they're not going to say that, right? But the love is gone, I would argue. This isn't a marriage of love anymore. Yeah. So, like I said, maybe it sounds self-serving, but I would say if I can find an author where that's just really not where all the conversation's going, it's like, let's talk about your book idea. Let's fall in love with that. Hey, can I call you again on, so if the conversation with your editor and the publisher is really about why your book is so great or what you want to do, and not so much about how can I get another, $5,000 of advance out of you.
Yep.
Yeah. Then you're going to have a different relationship with that publisher. And honestly, they're going to feel, I think in some ways they owe you more. Like they like this person signed on with us, and we haven't paid him a dime. We got to make this person successful. That's how I feel. Yeah. And I will promise you get that big advance from another press. You've just made yourself I don't know, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, or, but that's how I feel. What I've seen happen. So think about it. Because it's money that you're just going to get back anyways on the other end.
Yeah, I'd like the word loan. You're not going to get in any trouble. You're really giving people great information. I tease Neal a lot about his public speaking, but you made a great point and promptly buried it. But I want to unearth it real fast. You slipped in something there that's very important. Well, a couple things. First of all, that sense of partnership, that's always been important to me. Yeah. Quite frankly, in 1993, that's what I pulled from you. And it's why I wanted to go with you. And the other publisher offered more on that advance side. And again, at that point, I thought it was a gift and I still didn't want it. I wanted the partnership. But what you buried a little bit was, hey, how about we stop fixating on this loan that we're talking about and focus on what we're going to do to promote this book? And maybe we can work, maybe that's where our focus can be. Maybe there's a couple extra dollars there that we could match each other with or something. But that's putting your money where your mouth is, not just you, but me, the author too. And so for people who are listening, again, let's take our eye off of that. Don't focus so hard on that royalty either, because if that book does well, that number begins to go up a little bit. Again, when that book wins, you win, publisher wins. This isn't that complicated. Okay. But I will tell you that you may not remember this. I actually asked you to take the advance out of my last contract with you. I didn't want it. I wanted it to talk and fixate on the promotion of the book,
Yeah.
which Berrett Koehler did a fabulous job on. I got one last question for you because I'm a sales guy, and I'm laughing because I want to hear Neal sell a little bit. So here's my question. Okay, so we find somebody diamond in the rough who's got an idea and's got a bit of a following. I mean, they're beginning to really check the boxes for you. Looks like a good person, but there may be a battle here. What does Neal Mallett do to when he's hungry and really wants that author? And I don't mean negotiating. I give a number higher there. And forget the numbers. What do you do? What are you trying to do to make me want to go with Berrett Koehler?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we definitely have our toolbox for that scenario. And it's probably, I don't know if it's what you would expect me to say, but the typical approach, and again, going back to that auction mentality, is, well, what other, can you throw advertising into, like, give me a marketing plan that Berrett Koehler is going to do. How much are you going to, how many galleys are you going to print? Are you going to do, get some commitments from the publisher. And we used to do more of that. What we do now, and I would say it works 80% of the time, is just overwhelm you with good qualitative partnership and feedback. We went over lots of books where maybe they have some other options, they have some others they're speaking to. We're not going to be able probably to meet the advance at some of these places. But we also know that most houses are pretty short-staffed. They don't give the authors that same high-touch experience anymore, that real engagement. So we figured out our special sauce, if you will, is to really get in the weeds with you on your book and figure out, how can we make this book better? Like, what feedback can we give you that you'll just sit back and say, wow, I didn't see that. That's going to make my book sell more. Or you've just taken my book. I know you do this with speakers, it's the same, is it a $5,000 speech or a $10,000? There's a difference. And a lot of times we can work with an author around the title they were planning on having, or the way they were thinking about the audience, or what the big idea of the book is. And we kind of go in there and just really give them a report that blows them away. Yeah. And says, okay, I want to work with these guys. They're going to make my book. Because in the end, and here's the great equalizer, in the long run, the better books will sell more. So if an author feels we're going to get them to that better book and give them a partner that they can kind of use to build that, credibility, then they are going to go with us, even maybe if we're not giving them that same amount of check at the front. That's just chicken change compared to, all that, I guess, creative consulting you're going to get for free from your publisher. So yeah, I would say that's what we really double down. And you mentioned Jeevan. He's kind of my secret weapon in that. We have a really good team at Berrett Koehler, and so it's usually a team approach. Steve, our founder, has been editing books, longer than I have. If we want a book, we actually bring like all the team onto it and say, do you think a book is this a book for leaders, or is it a book for organizational change? Or how does this person know who their audience is yet? No, the book is real. And I'll tell you, in those conversations, the author doesn't even know we're having them. They're getting like $1 million consulting and we'll give it to you. Many times the author will take that feedback and then they say, okay, great, thanks. I still am going to go with the bigger check. That's all fine. The book is better. We had our shot. But I would say more often than not, they'll say, wow, I really want to stick with these guys. So that's what we do.
All right. And let me help you just a little bit. First of all, perfect. You did great. Neal, listen, I'm supposed to be the sales guy on this call, but because I know you and because I know Berrett Koehler, I want people to hear something, that and something else. Because I have 5 different publishers that I've worked with in my life. And my favorite publisher, I'm sorry to the rest of them, but I don't hide this. Berrett Koehler by far. And you know why? A lot of what Neal just told you, but something else. In the business world, we refer to it as value added. The financial industry, for instance, mutual fund's a mutual fund. And if I want emerging growth, there's 19 different companies that sell pretty much looking for the same thing. So now what? So we talk about value add. We talk about maybe collaboration with other authors. How exciting would that be? Well, Berrett Koehler is the only publisher I know that has an author's retreat. And a very reasonably priced author's retreat. So it's not all business authors, it's current authors. Sometimes we even have a little fun for some of the authors that need a little assistance. Neal mentioned the marketing workshop. I never had a marketing workshop with any of my other publishers. There's little things like that. Then that $1 million advice, all those things. So when you've got that great idea, understand that, yeah, a mutual fund's a mutual fund, but that value add, those other things, particularly if you're a newer author, you don't really know how to market your own book. And Neal's saying, we need you as a partner, well, and we're going to help teach you. And I don't know since the pandemic, but we used to have Authors Day, which I really took pride in. And again, nobody ever did this except Berrett Koehler, but flew me into San Francisco, Oakland, and spent a day. And we both won because not only did I get to spend a day explaining my book, but I got to meet marketing. I got to meet graphics. I got to meet editing. I got to meet the person who sells foreign rights. I met them all. And they met me. And guess what? We did it so we could all understand, so we could, again, partner and sell books. That's the value add that you offer, Neal.
We still do it. We still do Author Day. It's on Zoom, but we still are doing, yeah.
Don't you forget it, brother. All right, my friend. I really have enjoyed the conversation. I actually could have this conversation over a burger with Neal, but I want to share this with other people as well. Really an extraordinary editor and friend and human being. I'm grateful to know you, have you in my life. And I just thank you so much for being on the show. It meant a great deal to me.
Thank you, Rob. Back at you. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Well, one last thing. If this is a dream of yours and you'd like to take a shot at one of the greatest publishers, Berrett Koehler, you can send in a proposal. Send it to submissions@bkpub.com. They'll take a look at it. We'll do it again as well as we can next time, folks. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.